net working capital values due to the different values used to calculate components of the net working capital, as well as the weighted average cost of capital due to differences in beta, nominal cost of debt rate, tax rate, and CPI, operating expenses, and tax expense values due to the different inputs used to calculate the tax rate. The tariff requested for approval and recommended for approval by NESA or by PPS is highlighted on pages 9 of the PPS cover submission and 3 of the decision and reasons for decision document. I would also like to request members to note the rectification of the errors on denomination in tables from rand thousands to rands and replacement of table 9 of the AR calculation on page 18 of the RFD with table 3 on page 6 of the cover submission, as well as to request members to note that the volumes are in liters and not in cubic meters. The tariffs are high due to the Hamilton facility being small of 52 cubic meters, and this has been a trend with small facilities as compared, for example, like the Port Alfred Airport. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. I think it should have been said, I should have said Durban, not Pietermaritzburg, in terms of this site. Any comments, questions, guidance by show of hands, members? Mr. Kumete, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Chairperson. Good morning to you, members and colleagues. Just one question. Firstly, I do support this. I just needed clarification and maybe something that could also be included here, especially as indicated as the tariffs are high. The question that then arose in my head, are these tanks considered, especially in terms of location, are they considered primary or secondary tanks? And do these tanks have any bearing or relationship to BFP or secondary storage tariffs that are, or rather BFP as well as or the secondary storage tariffs that are published or managed by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. Over to you, sir. Then Advocate Stoller.
Thank you, Chairperson, and to the team as well. Chair, I also support the recommendation. Chair, maybe if I can just start by a question on the process. And Chair, I'm sorry to raise this again, but I just need some clarity in terms of the processing of these applications. Now, I've noted that there seems to always be a gap between the decision of the FTRM on confidential information and the publication of the application, and that gap to me is not clearly explained as to what is happening in between, because by the time the application gets to the FTRM for confidential treatment of information, I'll suppose that it would have been processed and everything is sorted out by the team. Now, once a decision has been made to treat certain information as confidential, I'm not too sure what happens in between up until the time the application gets published, because that period of time to me, it's not always clear. It's not explained what accounts for that gap, and at times it's up to a month, and I always wonder what is happening. It could be, of course, that there are processes that are being undertaken, and if that's the case, it's fine, but it's not always clear to me. And I know that we probably always target the 6 months to say, well, we have 6 months within which to process the application. But I think it's important that if we're able to do these things much earlier, we should do so. So my question really is around that gap between the decision by the FTRM and the publication, bearing in mind that we still give the applicant an opportunity to confirm before publication. So everything else to me is quite clear, but that gap is not clearly articulated. And then, Chairperson, just a few issues in the submission on paragraph 22 of the cover submission. The figures quoted there should actually be in millions. If you look at the table below, and the figure for 2024 does not correspond on paragraph 22, does not correspond with what is reflected on the table for the 2024 financial year. And then I just have a question, Chairperson, on the logic, and I'm looking at paragraph 25, but there's also in the main decision, the logic for adjusting volumes by CPI. I don't understand it. Because CPI is just a general increase in the price level. So why would you benchmark an increase in volumes against CPI instead of growth in the economy or GDP, as it were? So I just need some clarification there as to just the logic of adjusting volumes by CPI instead of looking at the growth rate. Or the growth of the economy, which is measured by GDP. And then in paragraph 56, for me, it's just a question of the follow-up mechanism that we have in place for the land rehabilitation provision, because we are giving the applicant 30 days to come back to us, and I'm just saying perhaps we just need to make sure that we have a proper follow-up mechanism so that this doesn't fall through the cracks, since it's contained in a decision that we are making. That's all from my side, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Advocate Stole.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Mr. Mtwan, Mr. Mahlan. Chair, I have no objection as well in supporting the application, but I've got one or two issues of clarity, which relates to the financial year of 2021-22, that the team said they have deemed it to have lapsed. If you look at paragraph 10, and therefore then the application before us is for the years starting from 2022 to 2024 financial years. Chair, if you look at paragraph 12, then it seems to have included the year that is said it has lapsed. So maybe I'm reading that paragraph with the other paragraphs in an incorrect manner, but the impression is given that the year that has been deemed to have lapsed has been included. And the second thing, Chairperson, is that do we have any punitive measures for licensees that do not comply with the application rules, in that they were late in terms of submitting that particular application that has now been deemed to have lapsed? The last thing from my side, Chairperson, is that in terms of the year now that we are required to consider, which is 2022 to 2024, I think for me it will be interesting if the team can just give highlights of how some of the information or financial information that were in that year that has been deemed to have lapsed taken into account in this new application. That was not clear to me. Alternatively, they can direct me in the submission as to where that is covered. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Mr. Mahlangu, assisted by the EM and HOD, please provide responses to the matters raised by members. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I will respond to some of the questions and then I'll request my HOD to assist with the others. With respect to Mr. Kumete's questions, I'll respond to the tanks are primarily used for, so to say, internal consumption. There's not even third-party use for the facility. And then with respect to Mr. Sibanda's question regarding the process, or so to say the gap, usually once the confidentiality is approved by the FTRM, we then prepare the ER implementation and letter, which is sent to the licensee to requesting consent. And once the licensee gives the consent, it is then that the application is prepared for publication. Perhaps we can improve internally in terms of the turnaround in getting approval for the ER letter, which is sent to the licensee for consent. I note the discrepancies you identified in paragraph 22. I will enhance the recommendation and then align the numbers with the table. And then the other questions, I'll request my HOD to assist. With respect to Advocate Sitole's question or clarity, in terms of the rules, licenses are required to submit their tariff applications 6 months before use of the tariff. And also in the past, PPS members were not amenable to approve pro rata or partial tariffs. So the reason that made us not to consider the 21-22 financial year is due to the non-compliance with the rule. However, because it was a multi-year tariff application, it was then agreed upon that we should then consider the remaining 2 years, which is 23. Now, in terms of the punitive measures, in this instance, it means for the 22 financial year, the licensee will continue to use the 2016 tariff, and this is likely to affect their revenues. Thank you, Chair.
No, I don't think that some of the issues are adequately addressed. And I was thinking that the EM and HOD will then come in. Particularly, we know very well that there's a whole outcry around the pricing of fuel, particularly at this time, and calls for the revamping or total overhaul of the pricing mechanism, which is a deemed pricing mechanism. When it comes to secondary and tertiary, primary, secondary, even tertiary tanks, if you want to look at it like that, is that this will then fall mostly on the secondary side. But we need to be able to kind of align the two. We've said a lot about the relevance of our tariffs, and therefore this must be looked at from that point of view. I have tried to initiate that process Madam Tua and the team to say, talk to the department. In fact, there have been several workshops or engagements that were held to try to get common understanding and see how the two can be aligned. That was also done in view of the discussion document on the defragmentation of regulation in the value chain, or the petroleum value chain. So it was done in that. And I think I can't overemphasize the issue that Mr. Kumete is raising in terms of having that alignment and creating the relevance, and to see some of the things will not fall squarely in certain categories because it's a deemed mechanism vis-a-vis what is actually happening. So, but the most important thing is to try to bring these together so that in everyone's head, it is clear as to where each piece of infrastructure falls. I think let's just make sure that, Madam Tua, we actually are looking at that project, because it is one of the projects that we have in looking at that kind of alignment and creating the relevance of our pricing and tariff setting and approval processes. But I still saw your hand, Mr. Kumete. I don't know if you are covered by my responses, or there is something else that you also want to say, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think for me, I'm partly covered what you are saying, and thanks for raising it, because I guess I may have just raised the question, but maybe not elaborated on it. But I mean, I think for me, we must be quite clear ourselves that we can't just be a regulatory burden to people who are trying to do business in South Africa. Whatever that we do must add value. It must be quite clear what value we are adding and why we are doing it. Otherwise, there are lots of risks associated with it, and Mr. Mkhize knows very well what those risks are. And clearly the debate in the country is very relevant, and we cannot act as if it's not happening. That's number one. Number two, I get a little concerned, I think, when we make statements that says, firstly, there is no third party. So there's no third party involved, but we then make statements that said it may affect their revenues. How? So if a particular tariff is just an internal transfer, price, or if indeed even this particular business is ring-fenced within this particular entity, if it's just a cost center, clearly they have a choice to buy or make. That is, they have a choice to either get this this service provided by a third party for much cheaper if they actually wanted to do this, or to provide the service themselves, or they saw it as a strategic service that they are provided. So I think it's going to be important how we phrase this. And Chairperson, you've provided, I think, this proper guidance on this, and the team honestly needs to look at this. We're not just doing this for doing sake. We shouldn't be looking, it shouldn't come across as we're just completing a template. What is the value we're trying to create? And that must permeate through in our analysis. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think there's also an issue that you're raising around certain situations where we most likely are not going to get third parties and all that, as to how should we treat those. I think it's part and parcel of what is going to emanate from the study that we are going to be looking at from a point of view of reviewing the stance on the SNI, the Sasol NATREF integrated pipeline. That will, I think, such what's going to come out of that. And I think maybe it was just a use of an improper word from Mr. Mahlang to then say that they are going to be suffering. I say hypothetically, that is what would happen, because in actual fact, to a proper response to Madam to Advocate Tole's question is that we don't have those rules to say apply by this time, because except if we've got a construction license where we're saying that you need to have the operation license going together with the application for a tariff, which would be 6 months before you start to operate, and we also here it's just the logic that you cannot apply. I mean, to deal with the tariff for a year that has already gone by is actually not doing any good, and that the statement in the paragraph, it just states what they had applied for. That is why it also includes the year that has elapsed, because we're just stating a fact as to what they applied for, but not how we then dealt with it. So those two are not necessarily contradictory. And thanks, I think Madam Advocate Stoll has indicated that she's covered thereby. With regard to the other issues, I think it should also be noted that the need to improve the turnaround times, which is a matter that we have discussed, as well as discussing how we need to. The team actually needs to work things out and not wait for the noting of the approval of the confidentiality by the FTRM. It's part of also in articulating. I think if there are certain issues that are out of the norm, the team must account for that. So Madam Tua, just to make sure that the team includes what happened when the time is actually longer than normal or longer than what would be expected in terms of our turnaround times. We need to account, because the issue of the timelines must be looked at strictly and account as to what transpired, why things are taking longer than they should, because we are striving to become an effective and efficient regulator in the sense, amongst other things, that we don't delay the processing of applications. I'm still giving you, Madam Tua and HOD, Madam Boko, an opportunity to say something.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Ms. Boko's hand was up, but maybe just on the process issues. Indeed, we noted the concerns by members, and in the latest submission, I have requested that colleagues do explain on what really happened, where there was a huge gap. And also our monitoring tool has been also updated to monitor the ERI implementation of that, because sometimes it does tend to take longer than anticipated. So our monitoring tool will assist in terms of capturing the timelines and ensuring that colleagues comply with those timelines. I would like to hand over to Ms. Boko to then attend to other questions. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you. Proceed, ma'am, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I think there's just two of Mr. Sbanda's questions that still need to be dealt with. Firstly, regarding to the adjustment of volumes by CPI, Chair, this is one of the things that we also inquired on. However, the licensee in its response indicated that it would be ideal to use the projected GDP growth. However, it is rather lower, and if we look at the current volumes for the monthly volumes being reported, we also saw that
the increases in volumes are a bit higher than the GDP growth. So hence we, in our assessment, also accepted the volumes. Otherwise, we do agree that there is no direct alignment between CPI and volume growth. It is rather the economic growth that would be used. And then with regards to, I think it was paragraph 56, Chair, regarding the follow-up mechanism regarding the land rehab provision that is to be submitted by the licensee. What we will do, Chairperson, is to include this in our compliance list, and then record that due date as at 1 month from today, or the transmission of this decision, and then do the necessary follow-ups in line with our compliance enforcement framework. Thank you, Chair. I think all questions are now covered. Thanks.
Thank you. I also note what is on the chat, and please, in updating or enhancing the submission, please take this into cognizance too. Advocate Story.
Just one last point in terms of the rehabilitation fund. Can it be used in the manner that is stated in the submission? I can't remember the paragraph. I'm trying to check it. Where it said that the licensee used the rehabilitation funds instead of claiming from insurance for the theft that they have experienced. I've seen it somewhere in the submission, Chair. I just wanted to just get clarity on that as well, whether can this be done, because I thought the rehabilitation fund was for a specific purpose, and it cannot be used, in my view, to cover the loss that has been incurred in terms of theft, Chairperson. I don't know, I thought I picked it up in the submission. If not, Chair, I apologize. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Sibanda?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'm happy with the explanation given by Ms. Boko, but I think in future, we should try, if there are certain issues that we don't agree with from applicants, I think we should point that out. Otherwise, it comes across as if we do accept the logic or the appropriateness of using CPI when we don't. And I think an explanation would probably go a long way in terms of clarifying our position. We might at the end up probably just accepting that, but I think it's important just to give the context and give our position on certain matters instead of leaving it as is, as if we accept it outright. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry to disrupt your meeting. My point is not on this application. I read it in the minutes. I apologize. That I raised. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're moving towards the decision. Oh, but there's Madam Massetti there. Madam Massetti.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, we have provided guidance to the team in this committee before with regards to the issue of volumes. What is the nature of the information and the verification that they need to undertake? It has to be the demand growth, because yes, broadly in the economy, we'll be talking about the growth in the economy and therefore the GDP, but you need to bring that closer to home to then look into how that will then affect, the growth in this business in terms of the volumes, in terms of the demand. So the licensees, they know if they want to claim that their volumes are going to increase, they must provide proof of what is it that they rely on in saying that their volumes are going to increase. So it shows the demand in the market. Where in the market are they going to get that demand? So that's what they need to do, the demand growth. So if they could do that. And in addition, we even ask that they also, for the other years in any event, especially if it's a multi-year, they must submit the demand growth profile for especially now for 2022 up until 2024, so that we can then be able to see, by how much these volumes are going to increase, and therefore if that is aligned to the anticipated demand growth within the market, and how that demand is going to be or what is going to stimulate that demand in the market. Those things are just specific things that we have said before, and they are supposed to be done, Chairperson. So I just wanted to emphasize that it's not something new, and I'm hoping that in all of the applications that come to the committee, they must be justified by the market growth demand and how that will affect the specific licensee that is making a case that the demand and the volumes will therefore grow. So that's my point of emphasis, Chairperson, to the team. May I also, Chairperson, just for the team on paragraph 11, where we state that the tariff was deemed adequate for processing on 3rd of March 2022. After receipt of complete application, it was deemed complete only for the for commencement of evaluation of the application, Chairperson. So that it's not broad, because sometimes you may then in the middle of your evaluation request additional information. If that can just be corrected, Chair. Thank you.
I note these comments. It was many comments and guidance provided by members, which are trying your team. You need to take to heart line, not just for this, for the enhancement of this. Decision and reasons for decision, but even for the future. Okay. Having said that, I would just like to move to the recommendation, which is to recommend that the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee approves the tariffs of 78.75 cents per litre and 79.26 cents per litre applied for the applicant for its petroleum storage facility at the end of for the period 1 March 2022 and to 28 February 2024, and to approve that the decision and reasons for the document attached here to as Annex A as amended by way of the inputs that were provided during the meeting. By show of hands, members, if you support this recommendation for approval. Thank you. Madam Massetti, Mr. Spanda, Advocate Tole, Mr. Kumete, I also do support. There is your decision. Then, Mr. Mahlang, from my side, I would just like to thank all present, and as well as those that are following us through the live streaming, because this brings us to the end of the open meeting in respect of the submissions that have been presented before the committee to consider.